Okay, the source sheets that we have are basically the quotes that were put together by the JLI. This is one of the 6-part course about Mashiach. It was a few years in the making when they put together this course. The title of the course is "This Can Happen." They actually wrote on the cover, "This can never happen," and then they crossed out the word "never." So all the marketing was, "This can never happen," with the word "never" crossed out. And the idea is that, of course, everybody learns the word Mashiach at whatever stage in life, and every person will take it. But of course, the big avodah is to be able to make sure that a part of our own life we believe and we feel, and we can start living in a way that we know that Mashiach can happen, and anything that we think can never happen actually can. So the way to do that was to work through the biggest setbacks, stumbling blocks that stop people from actually feeling that Mashiach can come, and using the Chassidus in general, but specifically the Rebbe's Torah, to be able to help us to work through our own personal blockages and be able to come up with a much closer connection, much closer reality to Mashiach being part of our life. So the way it works is, the first one started off with explaining to people how actually, if you look around the world, look around at how Teva is working, it's never been so close to Geula, and so many of the nevuos that we see, both from the destructions, but more importantly, recently, also from the promises the Nevi'im give us, they have tremendously indicated that now more than ever is the time for Mashiach to come. Why was that important? Not just to say things are going to be okay, but in order to help us realize that our own usual way of thinking, our most physical, human, secular way of understanding the universe, understanding our own life, is actually pointing towards Mashiach. The problem is only that we're not thinking. Why we're not thinking that way is another question, but the practical problem is not so much what's going on around us, it's in our own perspective. So again, the idea is this can happen and actually can. Just imagine for a minute, if Mashiach walked through the door right now, what would you do? Would you sing a niggun? Would you jump up and scream and shout? Would you go and give someone a hug? What would you do? Mashiach walks in through the door. It's really happening. It is. It's happening. And now today it's Tisha Bav. It's Tisha Bav Nitche. It's the Davzong L'chaim. Rav Shkashin said for sure everyone would run and catch the L'chaim. And if Mashiach does not bring his own bottle, whatever. So we're going to talk about this particular topic for tonight. Isn't so much about Mashiach can come and can't come. We're going to be talking about how far are we come from the beginning of B'riyas Ha'olam to now in the direction of getting closer to Mashiach. And what we're going to say is that, of course, we all believe that eventually the destination from Sheishis Yemei Bereshis and before has always been headed towards Mashiach. The question is, how much of those 5,782 years have we been traveling towards Mashiach? Has it been maybe one step forward, 2 steps back? Maybe a bit more optimistic, 2 steps forward, 1 step back? How far is we going? So, of course, we're going to look at what the Rebbe teaches us, and the Rebbe is going to show us that from a Rebbe height, when you go on a plane and you fly higher, you see things differently. All of a sudden, you see all the cars in the traffic jams, they're beeping and they're hooting, they're trying to get through. They're all little tiny things in a big city that's part of a country, that's part of a big mass of land. You start seeing exactly where everything fits in, and the big truck and the small little car and the motorcycle, all part of a overall picture. Every detail is important, but from the Rebbe's perspective, there hasn't been a moment since the B'riyas Ha'olam that we haven't been headed in the direction going towards Geula. So the biggest challenge to this idea is the tragedies. We don't only mean tragedies when something goes wrong and Chas v'Shalom is a terrible churban, which of course is there. We don't only mean when there's a terrible destruction, a natural disaster, but of course any sort of tragedy, any sort of setback. If there's a time where people stop learning Torah, people are less involved, so then of course there's questions the same. If we believe that the world is headed towards Geula, how can it be that there's a situation where people are not learning, people are learning less, people are acting with less Ahavas Yisrael, and we're supposed to believe that this is bringing us and this is in the direction of Geula. How can it be? So, of course, part of what JLI is very good at is simplifying complicated matters. Now, part of the problem of simplification, oversimplifying a complicated idea, makes us walk away thinking we know it. I know it. I can explain to you exactly why, this, that, and the other. I can tell you the full sugya. I just learned a little article. I read up a little bit about it. I read 10 quotes from a different sikhas. Now I'm not a maven. However, what it does is, for my human mind, it allows me to be able to put things into action mode, and it gets me going. And that's already a good start as a taster. So what we're going to learn today is hopefully going to be exactly that, a taster, that we should whet our appetite. We should go back and learn more in Yanagol Mashiach. We should realize that the goal is actually happening. It can happen, and it's actually happening. And of course, and more importantly, it should give us a taste of how the Rebbe looks at things. The key to understanding the tragedies are going to be as follows. We're going to pick up 4 major tragedies throughout Jewish history, and they're major tragedies. They are primary tragedies, and each one of them we're going to pick from different areas of Chassidus and the Rebbe's Torah to be able to try and figure out how we can better understand it from the Rebbe's perspective. The key to understanding, this is the Jelai Chachmas, the key to understanding this idea is in my hand. I have a key. Now, if you look at the key, you can see the key is made. You have this in your key as well. There are grooves and there's highs and lows in every key. If there were no highs and lows in your key, the key would not open the lock. So now I ask you the question, which part of the key opens the lock? The highs or the lows? Valid question. Which part of the key opens the lock? The highs or lows? Of course, the answer is we need the highs and we need the lows. And together, they push the right pins in the cylinder, the right amount. And that way the cylinder twists and it opens the bolt and the door opens and there you are, you're inside. This is the idea. From the Rebbe's perspective, from looking down at the whole world, the highs and the lows. Of course, when we are living through the lows, they are lows. That's why they are what they are. But in the general picture, if we have the breakkeit, the connection, the closeness, to be able to see it from the Abish's perspective a little bit more, then even whilst we're still in Golus, we can start already seeing that we are generally headed in that direction. That's what we want to do. So if you had to choose one word that would describe Yiddish history since the last 2,000 years, you can only use one word. What word would you use? Don't say it out loud. Just think for a second. If you use the word jungle, the Rebbe doesn't like the word jungle when you're describing the world. It's not a jungle. What word would you use to describe the history of Yiddish people in the past 2,000 years? And it's a real question, not because we need an answer and we're looking for a perfect word, but because it's a real question we ask ourselves, are we really headed towards good? Yes, when we come to the edge of the cliff, the next step is to fall off the cliff. Fine. But we haven't been working our way up a mountain. Have we? And the Rebbe is going to argue absolutely yes. Every step of the 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, 5,000 years, 5, 7, 8, 2 years, it's all headed in the direction of goodness constantly. And the Rebbe is going to take us on a journey. And we're going to start off with, I need to read my notes for a second. Of course, text 1 is our favorite text. It's an easy one to start off with. We will know it back to front. It's on your page. It's a quote from the Medrash Tanchuma, for those who need to know. Beautiful Medrash. Who hasn't heard this Medrash before? All the add-ons. But to have a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. Why is this important? Because, 1 second, apologize. He's singing it back to us. Hold on 1 second. Who hasn't heard this message before? All the add-ons. Okay, we're getting there. Finally, we're back on. I'm just trying to record this, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share the screen. It's on Zoom for Zoom people who want. You want to? You really want? Where do I go here when we're sharing screen? Meeting info. It is 869, 1506, 2682. And the code here is 364574. It's on YouTube also. Okay, good. We have to change it. With the code? Which one do you need?
869-150-62682.
And the code is 364574. You have it? Okay. Keep on scrolling these slides here for the people who are watching the recording. Okay. The step we want to take in revisiting 4 major primary tragedies is to be able to do what apparently people who run a business do when they start off running a business. As I Zachman, at least that you have to make it sound like. Before you start a business, you have to obviously have an idea, but you also have to have a plan. And in addition to a plan, one needs to also set before you start a business, at least this is what the coaches will tell you, to know what really the purpose of the business is. What are the values that you want to hold on to? Just say, for example, someone just got married and they have a growing family and they need to have money to earn money for the family. If at any point in time, the business they set up to be able to feed the family comes ahead of their family, if the business now overtakes and becomes more important than the family, then obviously, even though the business is making money, it's failing on the purpose the business was set up for, because it was only set up to support the family. If it's now ruining the family, then it's not a good business. Make sense? So what do we have to do? Before we start the business, we sit down and we ask ourselves, what are the important things that are really important, most important, secondary important, and how will this business feed into that? Before the Eibishter set up the world, the Eibishter made a plan, made out a vision, but whatever that means. It was in this week's share. What are the values by which the Eibishter designs and runs this world? What does the Eibishter really want? So the quote we just read from the Medrash tells us. When the Eibishter and Chassidus takes this medrash to the nth degree. Enormous. How much the Chassidus extrapolates and unpacks this loaded medrash. On the 3 points we're going to talk about, and we're going to bear in mind today, if we are going to design the plan for the Eibishter Chas v'Shalom, but we're going to try and understand what the Eibishter's plan was for us, better said, there are 3 points. Number 1 is, it has to be b'tachtonim. B'tachtonim means in the lowest place. Now, low usually means far and close. Something that's lower is further away from a higher point. And of course, by the Eibishter, there's no high and low. What makes something lower in relationship to the Eibishter? It's not further away from Hashem. Hashem is everywhere. What makes something lower when we're talking about b'tachtonim? Anyone? What's pshat tachtonim? I'm cheating because I learned this, but I prepared this as well. The answer is, Tachtonim means not that it's far away from Hashem, not that it's distant from Hashem, but it means that it's obscured. Hashem's presence is not felt. Tachton means it's hidden. And the more hidden it is, the more Tachton it is. And therefore the world has to be in a place, the Dira has to be in a place of Tachtonim means, has to be in a place where it's not obviously Kedusha. It's going to be important for us to remember that definition. Remember, we're setting out whether the world is successful or not. Most people would say if you're making money, you're successful. Of course, that's not a good enough reason to create the heaven and earth to become wealthy. So what does Hashem design the world for? He wants to have a Dira Yisbarach. Number 1, it must be b'tachtonim, in a place where it's obscure. Number 2, we're going to say it has to be a Dira. A Dira means a home. What does it mean, a home? Unlike a house, this is the usual mashal we say, if someone gave you a free ticket to go to any hotel you want for as long as you want, and it's the nicest hotel, and you're there for a day, for 2 days, for a week, for 3 weeks, for 15 weeks, and at a certain point you say, enough, I want to go home. Why do you want to go home? What's that home that you don't have in the hotel? Maybe. But let's just say you want to go back to a place where you feel comfortable. Says the Rebbe in, where is this? Sefer Asichas Toshim Memches. It's in small, sorry, I'm going to use my glasses here. It says text 2. The Adgoshi and Dira b'tachtoinim is as der Giluy Elokus Olamata b'tachtoinim soll sein und as Haifen wie ein Mensch lehavdol gefindt sich bei sich in sein Dira.
B'shas Mensch geht in Gas, oder gefindt sich bei der Zweiten, muss sein, beschränkt, mit Zumzum, Leute dem Ort, wo gefindt sich. If you come to my house, you're going to try and make sure that you don't upset me, usually, at least most people do. Masha'enkim bazichin dira, is begolu barchave. Was das ist der Perish von Isava, Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyas Lo Yisbarach, dira betachtoinim, emphasis added, as the Gila Lekus Lematel soll sein, begilu barchave. Und noch mehr, der Din bei Melech is ein Roi Noisek Shu Arim. This is Hepech Kvei Mahamalchus. Und after we came bazichin dira, is for them, is man is showing the Matzah, wie der Melech is Arim. The time from them, weil die Kavonim von Dila Yisbarach Tachtoinim, is there's Galas von Ebish and Lamativ Tachtoinim will sein, Soif, so Soif sein, Beli, Shum, Lavush. This is like it says in Tiny Periglam Avav. Wie steht da von Osten Lavai, was dem mit sich durchwiehen, die Kavonim von Dila Tachtoinim, weil die Konef euch Merecha. So is Kasimcha, Vechnaf Lavush. I think the Rebbe continues to say that we are also in Matzah. Okay, so we have in text 2 that the second condition, we're focusing on number 1 in Tachtoinim, concealment. Number 2, it has to be where Hashem absolutely feels comfortable. So it's the lowest, where it's not observable, and it's at home, where he's not covered. The third point we're going to make is the third point of our value system for knowing whether we're successful and where we're headed to is going to be that it has to be made by us. We need to invite Hashem in. If Hashem makes the dira, then it's not b'tachtonim properly. Not only does Tachtonim require that it should be in a concealment, but it also requires that it has to be made by the Tachtonim. The Eibush has to be invited in. In the terms we used when we used the JLI course, it was if you want to have a relationship, if you want to have a closeness to a significant other, there must be a two-way relationship. If Hashem superimposes itself upon us and we know nothing else, then that's not really a two-way street. That's not we created the dira for the Eibush. That's the Eibush had a dira. Well, guess what? If the Eibush needed a dira, he could have made it himself without us. The concept of dira v'tachtonim requires that we make the dira v'tachtonim. This is text 3 by invitation only. Hakavana b'dira v'tachtonim. This is from the Kotesichas Chelik Yud Beis, page 73. I actually didn't check this one up. Hakavana b'dira v'tachtonim hishach tachtonim tzadin yonim heim, the way they are for themselves. Yirodira lo yizbarech v'lechin tzarech shadira tiyaseh ayidei ha'avayda dinasham mis Yisrael and l'mashas b'gufim yudavka oz nice and atachtoinim dir lo yizbarech mashen kein im adira hoyse nice mitzad gilushim l'mayla hari oz atachtoinim atzmom mitzad inyanim heim l'nasu dir lo yizbarech the tachtin didn't become a dira, and therefore you don't have dira b'tachtoinim, you have that dira that happens to be also find itself in tachtoinim. So this is our 3-point checklist. At every stage in history, we are going to ask ourselves, how are we doing? How are we doing? How are we scoring on the Tachtoinim, lowly realm element? How are we doing with the Eibishter feeling at home? The Etzmos of the Eibishter, Etzem Hashem, is feeling comfortable here, Hashem's essence. And number 3, was it built by us? Have we managed to bring that into fruition? And these 3 factors, these 3 questions are going to help us understand the journey of creation. Like we said, the key, the highs and the lows of the whole of creation are actually all part of bringing closer a time where all 3 of these things are answered yes. Here we go. I'm just going to do this. Spotlight for everyone. Here we go. As we were saying. Those who are on Zoom can see more than you can. Here we go. We're starting off with 4 steps in history. Each one we're going to ask ourselves the question, how are we doing these 3 questions? And what can we do to get to the next level? Stage in history number 1 is going to be the very first stage of history, Gan Eden. Adam and then Chava are created and they're living in Gan Eden. And we know the end of that story ends off with him getting kicked out because of the Echet Eitz Hadas, which was the first and worst sin. It was a sin from the very beginning, the creation of sin, but that was the act number 1 in history. Act number 2 in history is going to be the story of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is only 20 generations later, but Avraham Avinu does what no one else did before him. He starts campaigning for everybody to know Hashem in a time where people did not know Hashem. And of course, you know that Avraham Avinu was very successful in what he did. The end of that story is going to be when what Avraham Avinu did and managed to achieve almost went entirely mechulah. The Rambam describes that Avraham Avinu's entire mission, his vision of bringing up the whole Hebrew nation, the whole Hebrew tribe, and promoting Yiddishkeit or Eibishter, a monotheism around the whole world, at the time when the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, was almost entirely extinct. The only people who held up the column was Shevet Levi. Nobody else was following. The whole Avraham Avinu big thing was going under. And that's going to be the second act. Avraham Avinu bringing it up and it being destroyed tragically by slavery in Eretz Mitzrayim. What was after that? Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsov, you have Matan Torah, which was another riding high. And unfortunately, that lasted very little amount of time. And that crashed with a Chet Ega. Very short man, but that's another tragedy we're going to follow. So far, first tragedy we've got is Chet Tzadas. Second tragedy is not so much what we did wrong, but the slavery. I guess it was also that we let go of what Avraham Avinu had brought up, but that was because of the slavery in Mitzrayim. And then the third tragedy we're going to talk at is the Chet Egel. The fourth thing we're going to do is we're going to skip and talk about Beis Hamikdash, Mishkan, Beis Hamikdash, Rishon, Sheni, all in one package. And we're going to call all in one package the destruction of the first and second Beis Hamikdash plus Galus is going to be the fourth tragedy we're going to focus on. Okay, so this is going to be our 4 steps. Gan Eden, Aram, Geula of Mitzrayim, and Beit Hamikdash. Each one of them was destroyed. First one was destroyed by the Chet Tzadas. Second one was destroyed by the slavery in Eretz Mitzrayim. Third one by the Chet Egel. And the fourth one, of course, the Beis Hamikdash, where destruction, which is what we want to focus on now. Start off with the first one. We start off with Gan Eden. Gan Eden. What do we know about Gan Eden? He used to plant the Gan Eden. We also know that he put Adam and Chava in there, the Shamra. We also know that in the famous Maimon Basi Lagani, which is based on the Medrash, which describes Gan Eden, Basi Lagani describes the garden of Hashem, which isn't just a garden, it's my garden. And the Medrash says not only my garden, Lagani can be understood to mean Lignoni, my very special garden. And all of this is what Gan Eden was. Gan Eden was a place where you had Adam and Chava, who were human beings, living in a place of absolute, complete Kedusha revelation, and they are living together with Hashem. Isn't this brilliant? You have Tachton, Adam and Chava. You have Eibishter living there. It's Dir Loyes Baruch B'Tachtonim. We hit it all off. That's sick. Have we really managed to tick off the boxes in Adam and Chava living in Gan Eden? Have we managed to achieve a Dir Loyes? Help me out. Anyone? Any part of those 3 missing in Gan Eden? Remember our 3 steps. We have to make sure it's Tachtonim. We have to make sure it's a Dira. And we have to make sure it's built by the Tachtonim. Anyone? The answer was we failed on all 3. First of all, it's not Tachtonim. They're living in Gan Eden. It's Pasik Lagani. Number 2, the Eibish's Gilui is not there. We're going to talk more about that. That failed on that front as well. And the third thing, made by the Tachtonim, absolutely failed. The Tachtonim had no place in there. They were barely there. They didn't achieve it. They didn't manage to make it. And of course, Gan Eden was nowhere to be found when it comes to Tachtonim. And that's why it was a failure. I'll just put the slide on for those who are watching. The answer is Gan Eden was not in the lowly realm. We'll explain soon why it was in the Etzim, the Eibishter, and it certainly was not built by us. So where do we go from there? We have a dealer is Baruch B'Tachtonim. We need to achieve. We have Yidden in Gan Eden, or Adam and Chav in Gan Eden, and it doesn't match the bill. Where do we do next? And the answer is the Eibishter sets up a crash. The mashal we used. Imagine you have somebody who goes to their child's wedding, and they're standing under the chuppah. And under the chuppah, the mother of the kala is holding a smartphone, making sure that the pictures, the selfie of the kala and the chassan standing there is brilliant, and it's a great shot. It's a fantastic picture. She stood under the chuppah. And you say to her, lady, grow up. Throw away your smartphone. You're at your child's chuppah. Live it. What are you looking at a smartphone for? Picture moments. It's the best, beautiful picture. It's the picture. You don't need no pictures. Live the real thing. Adam and Chava were living in a picture. It was brilliant. It was painted by a great designer, and there was nothing alive about it. There was nothing life about it. You need to have tachtonim, and you need to be able to work it through, and you need to divide Hashem in. And that's exactly what the Yiddish people needed to do. We needed to create a matzav of tachtonim. How hard is it to throw away your smartphone? It's funny, the crowd here doesn't have such a problem. The crowd in the JLI understood imagine putting down your cell phone. It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. If someone's addicted, someone who lives through the smartphone, it's very hard to put it down. And for an Adam, and for Chava, and for all of us, it was very hard for human beings to get thrown out of Gan Eden. Because all these fantastic downloaded pictures were going to be put on hold. And instead, we're going to have to step into creating and painting a real picture. And that's where the first crash happened. When we experienced the crash, experienced being thrown out of Gan Eden. And the Rebbe teaches us that the Eibush looking at getting thrown out of Gan Eden is not a tragedy. It was tragic at the time, but it's a low and a step towards Geula not because it will also be okay afterwards. Because this is the step towards creating tachtonim of Dir Lo Yizbarich. I'm going to ask you to join me at text 6b, which is a quote from a Maimer in, I had it written down somewhere else. It's in Melukot Vav, it's a Maimer in Chayei Sarah, Tafshin Lamed. Hatam apnimis anyonim. So you have to not miss out that brackets, because we're not talking about that this is what Adam had in mind. We're saying that this is the pnimis of what was going on. We're not suggesting that we should create this ourselves, but Rebbe should definitely have this in mind. If you can say that, Hatam apnimis anyonim. Al zeh sho Adam goyresh migan Eden hu ki hakavana the dira b'tachtonim hi shadira tia ba'atachtin shin tachton lematim mimeno. V'shadira boy tia mitzad in yonei the tachtin zeh. V'lochein v'shachei avay lekim migan Eden. Lavres Adam agoymer. Las is hamakim the olam atachtin yoser muchshel agila b'chtei shagam atachtin tachton lematim menu yedila is baruch nilu yediyah mitzad in yonei. I want to stop here for a second. This was the main part of the shir. We're going to do this over and over again for 3 more times. But this is exactly the idea. The Rebbe is teaching this. We look at the world and we have to realize that what we're seeing is real. It's the world the Rebbe created. But what we are not seeing is also real. What our eyes don't notice is also happening. The Rebbe has created a difficult situation and he's thrown us out of Gan Eden because this is part of creating a tachton. Yes, questions. We love questions. When did it become a tachton? The answer, we missed the first part. I'm going to do a repeat. Tachton does not mean far away from Hashem. Tachton doesn't mean that Hashem is distant. Of course, what does tachton mean? The Eibush is hidden. So when does it become a tachton? When the Eibush is no longer observable. When did that happen? When the Adam and Chava stopped being able to see Hashem, that's when the world they were living in became more tachton, more real tachton. And the more Hashem was hidden from us, the more tachton it became. How we answer the question? How we answer the question? So right now we learned that it became a tachton that Hashem once from when Adam and Chava stopped being in a place called, or in a reality called Gan Eden, then it became tachton.
You're saying it was an impossibility then to actually survive.
I didn't say that, but you could definitely be considered correct by saying that. And the idea is impossibility is a complicated word.
That's what you're saying.
It was bound to happen. How about that? It was bound to happen.
Yeah, so that means it had to happen.
Correct. In order for Hashem's plan to work out, the world had to be created. In order for Hashem's plan to work out, it also had to have a tachton. Maybe mute or second. Yes, so as far as we're learning today, the answer to your question is correct. The answer is that it was bound to happen. You want to say it was impossible not to happen, we can use that word as well. I'm not sure what the word impossible means in this context, but let's just say it had to happen. Going forward, moving right along. The Eibush planned this world exactly this way. I do want to point out one more thing. You've just raised a question in my mind. I want to share it. We are not touching on the why of the Eibush created. We are touching on what the Eibush created. So if we say why, we mean for what, not why is and how come. So that one more time. The Hebrew word for why is lama, and in French is pourquoi. and in Yiddish is farvos, which is made up of two words, for what? And the answer to for what is the following. Why something happened, as in the question, how come something happened? How dare something happen? Or how is it okay for something to happen? We are not touching when it comes to why Eibishter did something. But for what the Eibishter did, we know. Why did the Eibishter, for what did the Eibishter throw us out of Gan Eden? The answer is in order to create a tachtin. It's not the way it felt at the time. It really isn't. So now, using this piece of approach, this perspective, we will then go and revisit 3 more tragedies and reapply the same sort of idea. The reason why it happened, for what it happened, in our experience, was an absolute tragedy. And in the overall picture, from a Rebbe perspective, there has to be, it's a going forward. It's the key. The highs and the lows are the keys. Are opening the lock. The lows are also part of creating the Dira, Lo Yisbarech, B'Tachtainim. We said 3 steps. It must be Tachtain, it must be Dira, and it must be created by the Tachtain. So in very short, in the next few minutes, we're going to try and cover at least 2 or 3 of the next 3 pieces. The next step we have after the story of Adam Harishon getting thrown out of Gan Eden is 20 long generations, in which during that time, the world went not only pear-shaped, haywire, totally off the mark. The Tachtin was so extreme, it was so intense Tachtin, that creating a Dira was almost off the map. Until along came Avraham, and there was a long, beautiful text from the Rambam, which describes what Avraham managed to achieve, and he managed to bring out... No, it's not on Zoom. And the idea was that Adam Rishon lived close to Hashem. Avraham Avinu tried to recreate that. Avraham Avinu tried to, in the reality of Tachtonim, where people were no longer experiencing Eibishter wherever they went. They maybe knew of it. Some of them even believed about it, but they weren't experiencing it at the first level. Avraham came about and started teaching about Eibishter and be able to create a reality where Hashem should feel comfortable here. There should be houses, there should be homes, there should be villages, there should be people in which Hashem feels comfortable to reside. Adira lo yizbarach. And where should that be? In Tachtonim? And he does a fantastic job. He really does a great work. So now let's just ask ourselves, how was Avraham doing in the places where he was successful? Was it made by, let's just get the slide up. There we go. Was it in Tachtonim? I'm going to answer that. It's a yes. Avraham Avinu lived after the Girush from Gan Eden, and therefore he lived in a place of Tachtonim. Yes. Was it revealing Hashem's essence? We're going to answer the question in a minute. Was it built by us? It was built by a human, by Avraham Avinu. Let's go back to the question. Was he revealing Hashem's essence? Here we're going to say that we're going to read text 8, which is a quote from the Alter Rebbe and Torah. This is something we probably all know, but it's beautiful to see it inside. If there is any definition of Eibishter as creator of heaven and earth, you have not met Hashem yet. The mashalim that uses, the caterpillar that has to go and disintegrate. But I think the easiest mashal for me to describe is the baby that's newborn. The newborn baby knows that mommy exists. Of course mommy exists. That's how I eat. And that's what mommy is. My source of food. She changes my diaper. She makes sure I'm well fed. She makes sure I sleep when I need to sleep. Is there anything else to mommy besides for looking after me? No way. If mommy Chas V'Shalom takes a phone call or starts chatting to anyone else instead of looking at me, how dare you? Start screaming and shouting, like fetching. Hello, I'm here. You're looking the wrong way. This is me. Why? Because mommy's entire existence is to look after me. At a certain point, the child grows up and realizes that actually mommy is much more than looking after me. And it happens to be one of the things that mommy does, and she's really good at it, I am very grateful for, is that she looks after me. So Avraham Avinu's reality described Hashem as the creator of heaven and earth. You think the world came about by itself? The moon and the sun are running by themselves? Of course not. It must have been created by Hashem. There must be an Eibishter. But the little baby has never met his mother yet. They never met. You're just taking off mommy. But to have a relationship, to have an understanding, to meet up with your mother to meet up with somebody else is to appreciate who they are. And in that sense, Avraham Avinu's reality is Taka b'tachtoinim. And it was Taka created by the Tachtoinim. But you haven't yet met the Eibishter. Because the greatest thing we can think of is that the Eibishter is the Mami of us. And until a certain point, we have to crash that. What was the next step after Avraham Avinu? Hashem says to Avraham, you're going to have children. They haven't even been born yet. They certainly haven't done anything wrong yet. They haven't been born to do anything wrong to be punished. But I'm telling you today, they're going to go into Golus. They're going to be born and they're going to go into Golus. Why? What did they do wrong? No, they did nothing wrong. We're going for Dira is part of B'tachtoinim, and a part of that is to make sure that the Dira is a real Dira, that Atmos is going to be found. In order for the Yid to discover Eibishter, which is more than just Bayrei Olam, they must crash and crush the notion that Eibishter is creator of heaven and earth at Khan. How are we going to do that? We're going to turn the plan upside down. And everything we believed, that Eibishter runs the world. And we understand that. And we get that. That's as much as we get is going to go on its head. And Avdus, in Mitzrayim, started ripping it to pieces. It was a terrible blow to Avraham Avinu's future and his dynasty. Everything that Avraham stood for started getting ripped to pieces. Because his children were put into such difficult circumstances, they literally stopped believing everything. They didn't have time to believe. They didn't have a mind space to believe. And it chipped away at us enormously. And that was the destruction of Avraham Avinu's reality, which was Tachtoinim, made by Tachtoinim, but had not yet had an opportunity to invite in a deepness of the Etzem, the Eibishter, and therefore, from the Eibish perspective, it was a step towards Geula. It was a step to being able to have reality, where Yizbarech, Loi, the Eibish himself is found with Tachtoinim. In order to do that, they had to have Avdos. And what happened next? The Geula from Mitzrayim. What was the first step of the Geula Mitzrayim? That Teva is not in charge. There's something beyond Teva. The Eibishter isn't just the creator of Teva, but the Eibishter is above Teva and controls Teva. Not only is the architect of everything we know, but Eibishter crushes that, which is why in text 10a we have here, what is the title? Allow me to introduce myself, says Hashem to us. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. What's the next words in the pasuk? Asher Hositzicha Mi'eretz Mitzrayim Mebeis Avodim. What was the Alter Rebbe? Okay, the Rebbe asked the question. I think it's quoting from the Alter Rebbe, maybe not. The Rebbe asked in text 10b in Teres Menachem Tashma and Beis. Yidua Kushus. Oh, there you go. Kushus and Mefarshim. Madua Nema Anochi Hashem Elokecha Hositzicha Mi'eretz Mitzrayim Mebeis Avodim. Why is the Eibush introduce himself to Yiddish people? I am the one who took you out of Mitzrayim. Isn't it a great idea to say, I took you, I created you, I made you? What's the answer? That wouldn't achieve Dir Lo Yisbarach B'tachtoinim, because it wouldn't be Lo Yisbarach. The fact that the Eibush that created heaven and earth is to do with Olamus. It's not Etzem. That's the child, no, that the mommy feeds me. But to know that the mommy exists in her own right, the Eibush is real. Much more than the biggest creation in the world. For this, the Eibush says, I took you out of Mitzrayim. You have rules of Teva, which I created, and I'm above that. You do abir b'zeh shekol sing the system time made all flog the yosem ashbris shmaim haaretz yagam the achir shni b'shmaim haaretz v'glos Teva v'bekurch shegez baruchu l'shanis t'sidi Teva v'l'hayin is on way from shlomayim Teva. This is the Eibish's response to the problem of not having full Dir Lo Yisbarach B'tachtoinim. The Eibish's response is that we are going to crush Teva. We're going to crush even the idea where we have, how long? 5 minutes? Okay. We're going to crush even the Dir Lo Yisbarach. We're going to crush even the idea that the Eibish looks after those who worship him. It's going to be Avdos. And then the Eibish is going to demonstrate that the Eibish is not limited to Teva. So it felt like a tremendous setback. It felt like a tremendous tragedy. There's actually Hashem telling us that there's something much deeper. There's a reality where the Eibush is in charge. We're going to do the next idea from the Oisvenik, and that was that the Eibush took us out of Mitzrayim, which was a tremendous high. The Eibush gave us the Torah, which was a tremendous high. And all of that was enormous. The Eibush gave us Atzmus. The Eibush gave us miracles that don't associate whatsoever. Even at the splitting of the Red Sea, Ra Shifcha Alayam, and then you have the Matan Torah, where the Eibush himself came and spoke to each and every one of us, and the Eibush and Yamasa came down into this world. This was absolute Etzmos coming into this world. Have we hit the bill? We have Atzmos, dear Lord, Baruch, the time to help me out. Have we hit the bill? You have Atzmos himself in this world. What are we missing? It's not made by Tachtoinim. Very nice that the Eibush is in the Tachtoin, but who made it? It's superimposed. What's the biggest raya? That you can walk up Har Sinai a minute after the shofar blows, there's not a drop of Kedusha there. Why not? Because it wasn't Tachtoinim working their way up. So of course it wasn't Tachton, and it was Eibush, but you're missing the third element, that the Achton hasn't built it. And that's why, right after Matan Torah, 40 days later, unfortunately, it didn't last. You had the biggest crash. What the Eibush to realize is, or the Eibush's plan is, that of course we want the Yidden to experience Atmos, and that's going to come when the Eibush himself, not just Teva and creation of Teva. Havai Elikim is going to be in his gala, but everything's going to be in his gala. But how are we going to experience Atmos? That is Matan Torah. The Eibush himself is revealing himself, and that crashed. Why did it crash? Because the next step to being able to connect to Hashem ourselves from the bottom up, that the Tachtin is creating the Dira for you, Atzmos himself, is that the Tachtin should stop experiencing the superimposed Eibishter and start building our way up to build towards that. This is text 13, the Rebbe in the Kotze Sichet Schelech of Aleph. The Ashras Hashchina b'Mishkan is gekommen durch v'asuli Migdash adesias b'nei Yisrael. Mibal the Ashras Hashchina is gekommen durch Asiyas Adam is the Kedusha Nikba geworden in the Chefza Geshem Mishkas geworden Kedusha in the Kishkom Mechalakav. So we basically have that the Cheta Egel was the tragedy, which to us experienced it as an absolute tragedy, but we know from a bigger perspective, from an overall height of view, we can now appreciate that that was a step towards more and more real, dear Lord, where instead of having it superimposed upon us, we have it from the Eibishter. The next and last, the most important step is what happened to the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash was built by human beings. It was the house for the Eibishter himself, Atzmos, and it wasn't Tachtonim. What could go wrong? What was wrong with that? And the answer is from the Maimah of Ba'at Tetzaveh, in which we understand that although the Beis Hamikdash was built by human beings, it was a bit like the instant reaction. If you touch a button on a computer and you automatically get something flash up on your screen, you know that next time you push the button, it's going to work. What happens if it doesn't work that way? You push the button and you don't get instant reaction. The screen is in a different room. You don't know if it's working or not. So then the difference between those two realities are, am I just reacting to reactions? Or am I really building up myself? In the words of the Rebbe, do I need Mashiach and Geula because the world around me is oppressing me? Or is it Kosses L'Moyer just because there is no Gila the Eibishter? Do I care about it myself, or I'm only caring about it when I'm being reminded? Today, when we're sitting in Shul, and we're here learning Torah, the year is 5782, and it's almost 2,000 years since we had a Beis Hamikdash, which is a mitzvahs asay min Torah. It's been almost 2,000 years since we bought a carbon. Are we waiting for Mashiach to walk through this door right now? Are we looking back to see maybe after the door's opening? And this is what the Eibush is expecting from us. Not only did we have a Beis Hamikdash, the Eibush told us, "Basi the Mikdash, this is how you should do it, and this is the only way it's going to happen." No, says the Eibush. There was Chas v'Shalom a Churban, a tremendous tragedy. But the tragedy is not there so that we should suffer. The tragedy is there so that we should have kosses who the Eibush really had in mind. And enough is enough. All of the talk and all of the learning is in order for the Eibush to hear us say, "Ad Mosai now." The Eibush benches, we should dance into Gola Behedu Yemenu right now, even before Baruch Hu. Thank you for joining.